23 years, 304 tests, 2 World Cup wins with the All Blacks.
You were privy to a guy like Richie McCaw from test number 1 through to test number 148.
He's a goat. And people ask me that question quite often. Like, he has talent. There's no doubt about that. He can do some things that are actually super special. But I think he was more made than born. He was put through the furnace in those early years, which really, enabled him to dream big and leave no stone unturned. What we did back in those days is we spent all our time making sure that there was a gap between where the rest of the world are and where we were. Now, I think it's like that. We've got a major problem. I haven't had any coach going even right back to your Smithies, Steve Hansen, Graham Henry and Fozzie all had their moments where the furnace was turned right up and she's just tough to be in the job. We came that close to losing the haka altogether. People don't realise how close we were. We were a whisper away.
This week on Between Two Beers, we talk to Gilbert Enoka.
Gilbert is one of New Zealand's leading sports psychologists. He was with the All Blacks for 23 years, 304 tests and won 2 World Cups.
He also worked with the Silver Ferns, Canterbury and Crusaders Rugby, as well as the Black Caps, and most recently he's been involved with Chelsea Football Club, the New South Wales Blues and England Cricket. This was an epic episode. The first half we learn about the man, his difficult upbringing and how it turned him into the person he is. And the second is full of all of the biggest and best lessons across his epic career with so many different clubs and teams. This episode is brought to you by the TAB. Got a hunch? Download the new app today and get your bet on. Enjoy.
Gilbert Enoka, welcome to Between Two Beers.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
We're very excited to have you in studio. It's a Sunday morning. To timestamp this, the All Blacks have just lost. The first question I had was, you're still so closely linked to all these players. Does your thinking go straight to how they're going to be dealing with the aftermath of that in Argentina?
Yes. In the car on the way over here, I was just charging and chartering a text message. I try and keep the contact and connection consistent, really. So win, lose, whatever, I'll always text, always respond. Not to everyone, just targeted people that I have a good and solid, close relationship with and understand how they will feel and, just help them move through what happens next, really.
Have you had a chance to fire those all off, or are they still drafted in the edit phase?
I filed some off before we got here, so I kind of like to get in early on that.
What sort of language do you use in those messages?
Not emotional. It's trying not to make it bigger than it is. Try and those sort of situations. What you don't want people to do is just get stuck. You can't change it. So you've got to just move on to what's next and keep it contained and keep everyone intact. So you've got to do that yourself first and you help them to do that, then you do it for your mate and for your brother. And don't ease the pain, to be fair, but it just helps you get through the different waves when they come.
Historically, when you've been in that situation, have you been the one that people make a beeline to straight away? Or are you... How does that? What did that look like for you?
Well, not really. Yes and no. Most people go internal, where they just get inside their own feelings, really. So it takes a while to catch up to the reality when you walk into an All Black shed. You've lost the game. Doesn't happen often, to be fair. And you sit down and there's just an eerie silence. People captured in the weight of their own thoughts. And that's when the leaders normally got to step up. I tend to just hover, watch. Not much you can say to people in those moments. You just got to let them ride through it themselves. And you learn to know what people do like, what they don't like. Some people go up and put their arm around some people and you can see the players shivering like this and saying, it's the last thing they want. But I kind of, a casual look, at the eye movements, as we know, and the people that quite often you don't have to tell someone what you feel for them to understand how you feel. And it's in those moments that sense of connection and belonging are the strongest, when the brother is up against the wall.
It's so true, eh? There's so much in the eyes. Just the look can be so powerful.
Yeah.
Because of that start, it's probably obvious. You've been on our podcast stream list for many years now. We're stoked to finally pin you down. You've just released your book, Become Unstoppable, which is an incredible read for the listeners. I found it hard to put down. An absolute page turner. There's so much goodness in there that we're looking forward to unpacking. But you lay out your methods in great detail for the world to see. And I wanted to ask about, was it an easy decision to write publicly about all of your strategies and skills that you'd it seemed like they'd sort of been kept secret for so long?
Yes, it was an easy decision. Like, I'd always made my mind up that I'd share things once I'd finished the competitive environment myself. I had to be careful about what I shared about what was happening inside the All Black arena, because if there's anything they were still doing, then I wouldn't share it. But I'd had a conversation with Razor, and he said they wanted to move on from a few things, and just which I think was right, and to add their own juice to it, which I sort of went beautiful, because then I could share with the people the different things. Like at the book launch we had the other day, Dallas Seymour did the closing karakia, and he said a beautiful statement. He said, Bert, you're planting seeds that will help other people flourish. And I think that's my motive. I want the book to be helpful, and I want it to, and I did want people to get something out of every page. I think when you turned it over, I want you to get it. I think it's a book, especially in the Te Puna o Te Ki sections, that not only to be read but to be felt. And it's in feeling that you deepen the connection. So, I'm happy to share. I'm still learning, and I'll find new ways to grow, and that'll do. I will continue to do that. But it was time, and I just hope I help a lot of people. I want to help people in schools, kids in schools. I want to help athletes developing. I want to help elite athletes and coaches. I want to help people in the business world and education, and people in retirement villages. So I think there's something for all of those groups inside Become Unstoppable.
There certainly is, yeah, because you might think a book like that is for sort of elite coaches or athletes, but
performance environments.
Yeah, but there's so much in there, and like I said, there's so much that I'm looking forward to getting into. A couple of bits to check before we dive in. Are you still actively looking for your holy hour each day, and what is your holy hour?
Beautiful, nice capture. Look, it is. I'm not as religious in doing it every day, but I set the structure up that I engage in it every day. So for me, the holy hour involves three components that I check in on. One is my character. So is who I am wanting to be, am I actually being that? And if I am doing things with different people, whether it's with my grandchildren, with my partner or family, and, that am I practicing those particular aspects, the whole notion of your to-be list is more important than your to-do list. Second part's the whole mindset area, and saying, where am I vulnerable today to waver and get stuck a little bit in self-doubt or feel extra waves of pressure, and just to check. Quite often I do that in the shower. What's the one thing I want to do to really strengthen to be from a character? What's anything that I could be vulnerable in my mindset area? And the third area is around my body. What am I going to do for my body? Am I going to do Bikram yoga today? Am I going to go to the gym today? And so it's sort of a connection and a navigation around those three areas. And I'm not manic in terms of being regimented, but it happens every day that I'll do something. And the planning is more, it's sort of free-flowing in terms of how I set it up.
Ian Foster said we should check in on on your day off structure. What are you doing on your day off? Because apparently it was quite regimented when you were on tour for 23 years.
Well, yeah, like I became a stickler for routine, and he'd quite often say, "You coming out for lunch?" No, I've got to do what I've got to do. It's a bit like a little kid, but I'd get up and I'd part of my holy hour is having a couple of reds with George Duncan. At the end of the day, where you can just vent. Sometimes in an environment like that, there's a lot of things coming at you. So we just sit and we just talk, and He'd vent and I'd vent, and then we'd go to bed, and you'd feel really, really good. But I'd get up in the morning, I'd check my emails, I'd go to the gym.
9 a.m. with Mike Cron and George Duncan.
Yeah, absolutely. And that in itself was great. You just had a nice structure that you could lean into, and we'd head down there. And Chrono would have a pool of sweat around him, like he'd fill a buddy 25-metre swimming pool sometimes. And he went hard out. I was more into gymming gently, to do that. And George was still trying to build himself up with all his exercises. And then I'd come back, and then I'd a lot of my mental work, which was I led the session that happened on a Thursday morning. So the day off became quite an important day for me, because I had to get the structure of that right, work out the content, work out how we're going to present it, and it was always through one of the players. So I'd sort of do a little bit of work on that on early. Then I'd go to the gym, and while I'm gymming, I can think about it. Then I'd come back and do some more work on that. Have a bit of lunch, always involved a bowl of fries. I love my fries.
Oh, I heard it was a Thai lunch.
Yes, we go to Thai lunch often. And we'd say, how hot do you like your Thai? And Mike Cron would always say, make me bleed. He was right into that. And then I'd always get a massage in the afternoon.
2:30?
2:30, yeah. Always have a massage. And without fail, wherever I am in the world, to be fair. And then as the night comes and I formulate the rest of my session, the mental performance session we do, then meet with the coach and then chill and have a red wine with George. And that was pretty structured.
Sounds like a pretty good day. Thai lunch and
I
massage.
I love those kind of pillars of your days and weeks, etc. It speaks to me differently.
We're going to take a very slight detour here. We've got a segment brought to you by the legends at Maker's Mark. They believe we're all a little unreasonable about the things we care most about. So the question for you, Gilbert, is have you got an example of a time when one of your unreasonable decisions paid off in the long run?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's an unreasonable decision, but it was certainly a decision that people might have thought would take a different tack on. I've just had my book launch, and in preparing for my book launch, I was encouraged to get a professional MC to do the MCing of it. And as I was sort of thinking about putting it together, I wanted to make it a bit of a family affair, and I've got 2 children, Ben and Jessica, and I thought, I'd like them to do the MCing. They're both talented young adults and could do a good job. So I made the decision and said, no, we're going to go with the 2 kids. We're going to go with Ben and Jess. They did the preparation for the event, MC'd and managed all the transitions all the way through. And it was kind of cool because at the end of it, when the whole launch event had finished, all the talk wasn't about me. It was about the 2 people that MC'd it.
Yeah.
And that just made me feel so great.
I love that.
The best return for an unreasonable decision that I've ever done in a long while.
Too good. They're coming for your job, Shay.
Yeah. Well, sounds like it.
Thanks so much, Gilbert, and thanks to the legends at Maker's Mark for that one. There's going to be a little bit of name dropping in this next sentence, but across the last week, we have spoken with Ian Foster and Brent Impey and Sam Kane and mentioned you were coming on the podcast, and they all lit up. Like they were all so excited that you were coming on to share. And I was with Sam last night, and he said you need to ask him about the bare feet. Why is he always in bare feet? And he was either in jandals or bare feet, but he'd often kick off the jandals. So can I tell us about the bare feet?
It was funny, because at the book launch last Thursday when we had that, and we said, we had Q&A at the end of it. Someone got up and says, like, why do you always wear bare feet? It's kind of interesting, actually. I've worn bare feet pretty well all my life, really, and I think a lot of it goes back to when I was in the orphanage, really. I was in there, and a lot of the time we basically, we had shoes for some things, but not all things, and you did a lot of that there. When I went to university, I had no money, and I started playing volleyball, and I used to wear bare feet. And I used to tell people I preferred playing in bare feet, just I couldn't afford any trainers, so I just made out that that I preferred bare feet. And I think just from those experiences, whenever I can, I'll kick shoes off, and I love my feet being free. I'm presenting to groups. If I'm presenting to a group I know, it'll always be in bare feet. Like this morning it wasn't, because it was a group I didn't know, so I had to be respectful. But I just feel grounded and connected and feel very me. So it has its root in some habits of the early days and some reinforcements in my teenage years, and it's just carried through to the end. I'm at my best with my feet free.
I love that. Former favourite guest of ours, Dave Wood, is of the same mindset. Yeah. I love that. So you mentioned there about the orphanage, and I'm keen to, if it's okay with you, sort of dig in a little bit to the man and the makings, because it's a really interesting sort of foundation story. But can you tell us about your mum and dad in the early days?
Yeah, well, I don't have a lot of memories of my mum and dad, really, to be fair. Because Rarotongan, and my father obviously was born in the Cooks and came out in his 30s and spoke very broken English, actually. So, he was, but hell of a high-spirited. I didn't meet him really until he came home at 60 and said, "Here I am, look after me," as the islanders tend to do. But gosh, I saw a lot of my personality and everything in it. He came over, met my mother, they fell in love, had 6 children in 9 years, very busy.
Someone said the Book of Holloway.
All boys, and I was the youngest of the litter. And then he headed back to the Cooks, as you do, and left me and my brothers to be cared for by my mother. And she had a disability at birth, which affected her mobility, and quite considerably so. And it didn't affect her intellectual ability, just her physical mobility. And so she wasn't able to look after us, so that myself with my 5 siblings were placed into the orphanage in Tutanui Road in Martin. So I was 18 months when I went in there, and I don't have a lot of memories of it, probably because I've chosen not to. I stayed there from the age of 18 months to 12 years old, and while I was in there, I thought the world was made up of normal people and me. I thought I was damaged goods. They were the cards I was dealt, and that was just my lot. I learned 2 really important skills. I learned how to work and I learned how to fight, and both of those served me really well. But she was a tough old place. You had 30-odd kids, really searching for connection and belonging, and lost in that in-between space between, people that have a loving family and others that are really, really struggling, because you had no identity between the two. So I didn't really see my parents, never saw my father till really he came back at 60. When I left the orphanage at 12 years old, I went to live with my mother. She'd met another man in Palmerston North, and I had all these visions of going to this castle in the cloud. I'm a lame as tragic. And I'd only seen a nuclear family from the outside, hadn't seen it from the inside, But I had this pull of, wow, I'm going to this special place, and I can still remember coming out of the driveway of Tutanui Road in Palmerston North, in Martin, in tears actually, because part of me wanted to go to this nuclear family that I had all these visions of, but I knew I didn't want to leave the orphanage, because I had this security and I knew I could survive there, not thrive, but survive. So there was quite an internal wrestle that went on. I remember driving up to 304 Broadway Avenue, getting out of the car, going inside, and my brothers had left the orphanage 2 or 3 years before me and had no interest in helping a younger sibling, adjust to a new reality, because they were enjoying their newfound freedom, and I never begrudged them of that. That was just part of what happened. And my stepfather was an alcoholic, so there was piss all through the house and all the dysfunction that associates with that. And I found those 4 years that I was there much, much more difficult than I did inside the care facility. And then at the age of 16, I just said, I've got to get out of here. And I just got on a bus, went to Wellington, went to Christchurch, and stood on the Littleton Wharf as a 16-year-old with, no place to live and no firm work prospects, but knew I was in a better place. We were well cared for in the orphanage. There's a brethren, exclusive brethren, so, boy, we went to church, 3 times on a Sunday, and if you didn't sit up straight, you were whacked, but it was a good. I have good memories in it. Just an emptiness that comes from not having that belonging and connection nourished in a positive way.
You talk about the brethren and working through that, and you referenced work ethic before. It's right that you were on the tools and you were killing your own livestock for meat.
Yep.
Like that, those are the lessons that you're learning at these formative years?
Hell yeah, you see that TV program, The Good Life, where they do that stuff, This was a bigger version. They had 30 to 40 truckloads of firewood come in Makrakapa, and we had to stack it in the woodshed. You come home and you could smell the wood and you go, I know what the next 2 hours you'd have to go out and you weed the garden, you plant the garden, you move the sheep, you kill the pigs, you kill the chooks, and everything basically was provided from within. But gee, it taught us a good work ethic. And the expectation was that you contributed to your own well-being and your own function, and so you were made to do the different tasks.
And then looking after yourself in terms of learning how to fight, was that similar in the orphanage environment? Is it that kind of, is there a pecking order or something that you've got to kind of establish your own position when you're in there?
Yeah, you had to really. It was just because people were. Because their emotions are all over the place, they tended to react more aggressively to different situations because of just what they were going through. And there was, you knew which people not to pick a fight with, you knew which people to. Sometimes you didn't have a choice, because you had to protect yourself and protect something that was yours or you wanted. But we used to have some beauties, and in those days there too, they ruled by an iron fist. So if you broke a behaviour, and you had to sit down and eat your whole meal, and you couldn't leave the table until you completed it. And they fed you well, but some of it was shit because you didn't like it, but you still had to eat it. But some things today I don't eat because I was forced to eat them in there.
This part of the book really sort of captured me, and I've written down a little bit because I love seeing how the little seeds sort of turn into perhaps the path you went down. But you write about the emotional anguish was a theme in the younger years, and that the separation turned you into an emotional detective with a knack for spotting upset friends and classmates. So did you recognise that at the time, or is that later you recognised you had that skill to see, unrest in others? Yeah,
I think it bubbled away in the moment because, you could, I could go to school and things could happen and I could feel certain things, and then I could see other people around me doing the same thing. So I could see that. As I got older, it became a skill I could harness and polish, so that you could become really aware of what people were experiencing. And then, I always say to people that if you can meet an unexpressed need, or if you can anticipate a need before it's expressed, it's a game changer in anything really, in your children and work, and that's what my experiences enabled me to do. It enabled me to see when someone was lost, see when someone was beginning to rise in terms of their own anger, some who needed just that comfort or being removed from situations to help them manage it. So it was thereabouts uncontrolled in the early days, but observed. But as I got older and I began to learn my craft, I could then corral it and use it to the advantage as a practitioner, helping people to get better at what they wanted to do. Like I always used to go to my class at Helmorton when I could, 10 minutes or so earlier. When I was in the All Blacks, I always got on the All Black bus 15 minutes before any player came on. In any All Black meeting, I went to the meeting 15 minutes before anyone came in. And I just sat there and all I did is watch that door. And I was saying, now, where are you today? So as they came, because you can't move anyone if you get that bit wrong. And so I'd sit there and then they don't know that. Some of the boys say, oh, Bert, you're on early again. I said, yeah, I am. And then I could, if something needed to be done, I could have a quiet word to a coach or to one of the leaders or myself, and then you could move things in the environment and move the people so that they could achieve themselves. And and you develop a wonderful relationship when you connect with a person on that level.
Being raised the way you were, how do you think, because you missed out on a cultural dimension to your upbringing, and I'm wondering how you think about that and how you have, developed that, I guess, as life has gone on.
Yeah, well, I think I had, if you can say I was emotionally malnourished, which is probably correct, I think I was also culturally malnourished, because it came to me like when I was a teacher at Hill Morton High School, and the haka group were practicing, and I gravitated. I could be walking towards the gym and I could hear a haka being performed, or I could a waiata being practiced, and it just pulled me in. And as I've got older in particular, I just feel how much I've missed and being brought up and experienced inside that culture. As I've got older, now that we tend to connect more with our Cook Island Māori heritage. My brothers now build a home in Rarotonga. We've just come back with my brothers having 8 days there where we just connected with our whānau. So I do feel deprived in a way of something very special, because I think in Māori and Island and Pacifica, the way in which they live life, celebrate life, experiences is just so special. And I would love to have had that piece of my heart nourished right from an early age. So I play catch up to a certain degree, but I've always felt a strong pull, and the older I get, the stronger it's got.
Is it more meaningful now that you are older, learning it, reverse engineering it in a way?
Yeah, it is, but at the same time, it's hurtful too, because you're saying, wow, you've got to be careful I don't become a victim in it. It is what it is, but it is more meaningful when you can then look at your own mokopuna and you can start sort of saying, so what from this can I teach them? And as they begin their journey, and they have a name, Enoka, so what does that mean, and where did it come from, and how do we nourish it moving forward? So it is more meaningful.
Have you still got strong connections with the brothers? Because just a bit of research, it seems like they have all had successful careers as well. There's one who's a CEO of $1 billion company, and a doctor, and a few teachers. It seems like you've all gone and had these incredible lives.
Yeah, well, it's important. It's interesting, because people say, well, and in the book you'll see that photo that I have from the orphanage, and people say, well, what happened to all these people? I said, oh, well, some are dead, and most of them are in prison, and there are a lot of different things happen to them, but our family's been amazing, really. So you got Roger, my oldest one, he's a professor. He's probably the most qualified in his area in the world, and he's a professor in Boulder, Colorado. Second brother, John, he ran his own business. He's dead. He died of cancer. He was successful. Third was Bernard. He became an international teacher. Dudley, he's if you read in the book, he's from Stapler to CEO. He's the one in there, and he's brilliant. Whenever I speak now, people come up and say, "Oh, your brother used to be my boss. He was awesome," And then Tony, my other brother was became deputy principal at Waimea College. So all of them have become successful in their own right. So, and we're tight as. We have family reunions every 2 or 3 years where 60 of us all come together. And so what we missed out in our formative years, we do in our latter years. And so we've just get together, and we've been doing that for 2 or 3 decades now. And
all with very long marriages.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Which, in today's era is something quite incredible in itself.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, isn't it? I think because none of us want to go through what each of us went through, when you come through, first of all, the separation from the family unit, and then, seeing the separation inside the family unit from things that's just, we've become strong and connected to our partners. And I think I've been married for 42 years, and that'd be the least. The rest of them are all more than that. So
As a group of brothers, do you talk about those things actively around the separation at an early age and the difficulties that you had through those formative years?
We did a bit in Raro because it was just us. For some of my brothers, it's like opening up Pandora's box, so we don't. Sometimes it's a choice. The choice is better to not open the box, because, and sometimes in my own area, I've always thought, no, you've got to open it up and you've got to talk about it. But we probe the boundaries of it, but you know how when you're talking to someone, don't go there, and for their own protection and their own emotional turmoil. So I've been pretty comfortable talking about it and felt better when I have, and there's times when I feel like it and other times where I don't. And all my brothers are different. They all had different experiences. They were there for a lot shorter period than I was. I was there for the longest time. Actually, me and Tony, my second brother above from me. So, but no, they choose to keep it. Many of them choose to keep it in the box, and that's okay. We respect that.
So at 16, you moved to Christchurch to study sports. You graduate with a BA in geography. You go on to teach PA at Hillmorton High for 10 years. And for I understand, it's a low decile school, kids that didn't want to go to school and learn, people who had challenges, which you had a great affinity with, and you loved your time there and spent 10 years there. Is that an accurate summary? Yeah,
PE was my main subject. Like, I love sport. But you can imagine, I came at 16 to Christchurch, and I went straight into Teachers College, which was a 3-year course. I had a section at Hillmorton High School. Kids were older than me when I was there as a student. They were. Yeah, because I would have been probably 18 or something like that.
I was thinking about that, going 16 is quite early to be choosing the vocation as a teacher, but was it the stability of the job that you kind of looked at and thought, oh, this is something for me?
Well, I loved sport, and my older brother would be a phys ed teacher, and the third one was too, so I think, without directly telling me, that had shaped me in a way that had pulled me in that direction to do that. And so, so I sort of went there, and I went to Hillmorton High School. And, when I applied for the job, and when I was at college, I was a bit of a rebel. Being that young, flatting, I wouldn't recommend on anyone, to be fair. I was a bit of a wild man back, in terms of doing that. But when I applied for the job, the head of physical education, a guy named Ron here, he rang up the College of Education lady, her name was Pam Keane, I think, and said, Gilbert Enoka has applied for a job, physical education job here at Hillmorton High School. And she said, I wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot barge pole. And he said, that's exactly what he wanted to hear, because he then knew that I could have affinity with the students that were inside Hillmorton. So I got an opportunity that he gave me as a young teacher, and on the staff was Lee Gibbs, the Silver Ferns netball coach. So I started talking to her, and I was starting to play volleyball, and I wanted to get better, and I'd gone in to look at the mind, and so she was going into coaching, and she coached Canterbury and took me with her. I was assistant coach for Canterbury netball for 3 years. Then she went on to the Silver Ferns, and I had 3 years with the Silver Ferns. Mike Cron was a student at Hillmorton High School. You have Vic Pollard, the old cricket teacher, cricket player. But the kids I loved the kids. It was the right time for me in my career, because I was young, I had spirit and energy. And so I was there, and Hillmorton was a school that had the tough rowley kids, and then it had the middle class people from Hallswell. They were forced to mix together. A lot of fights, of course, with it. But boy, I always used to say to people, if you survive Hillmorton High School, you'll survive the rest of your life anywhere. Yeah. And I got into coaching volleyball, and David Kidwell, he was. I picked them up and dropped them off for a good number of years, because I had a rule to play in my volleyball team, you had to attend school. So to prevent him from not turning up, I used to pick him up.
Now, volleyball's an interesting one, because you say you played a little bit. You played for the country for 10 years. I think you're one of the greatest to have ever played. Maybe you're still patron of Volleyball New Zealand?
Player of the era?
I am patron. Yeah, it's a lovely privilege to be able to give back.
And got to tour the world, and it's through volleyball that you started to want to, is it learn to understand how to play better? Is that is that the door to get into the sports psychology as we kind of know it?
Yeah, it's a good question because, I was playing and, I was wanting our team to get better and I was putting all this time into it, and I thought, and a couple of tournaments we got 5th or at national tournament, and I thought, flipping heck, I'm not going to put all this energy into it. And then sort of, I became a sort of a captain and worked with the coaches and had a guy called Tony Barnett and Mike Dudson who were the coaches, and we wanted to get better, and everyone was looking at the body, and then I'd started to study psychology at university, and it started to really intrigue me. So, and then I sort of thought, wow, this is, most of the problems people that we were playing with weren't physical. They were recovering from mistakes and managing the nerves, and so it took me to begin to walk through that door, which was the mind, and how the mind can either assist you or restrict you, and that's how Wayne Smith and I got together. I was just telling him what we did in our volleyball team, and we were a high performance team before people actually began to describe them as a high performance team. We were that at Hill Morton too, to be fair. We got a bunch of kids off the streets, playing for each other, working hard, experiencing success, and just blossomed really.
Yeah, you mentioned Smithy there, and I want to bring him in. So he was an All Black at the time and was working for Canterbury Sport, and he would come and sell sports equipment to the phys ed department. What did your conversations look like? Do you remember the first time you kind of, had a chat with this guy and think, oh, he's
lightning in a bottle, man. Yeah. Something like that.
What did those early chats look like?
I was in awe of him, I had an existence, the existence in the orphanage took me down the road to think that an All Black is another species, it's another type of human being, untouchable by me, I'm just this other, I used to always call the ugly duckling really. You're over here, and then all of a sudden I get this opportunity to talk to him, and then as the doors open to work with him was just unbelievable. But to be fair, I listened, and Wayne was so open about how he was experiencing the high performance environment, and I'd just come and say, well, this is what we're doing, and he would awaken and he'd be encouraged, and he said, oh, well, can you do that with me? And I said, sure. And so we started having conversations, and he started using some of the things we were doing and getting more stability in his performance and better. So we worked a little bit more, and then when he finished, he just took me everywhere he went. All of a sudden, I just grabbed hold of his shirt. There's coat. Bring me with you, son.
We asked Wayne about you, and I want to read you what he's written. He said, "Birdie boy, changed my life, both as a player and a coach. We've been through everything together: All Blacks, Northampton, Canterbury B, Crusaders, Canterbury Sevens, New Zealand Sevens, initially as a volunteer. It wasn't just what Bert taught me, it was how he influenced my thinking to seek diverse opinions from different people, find new solutions to old problems. We were bold, we were sometimes weird, we tried to change the way rugby teams operated. Not everything worked. A few things did, and we never lost confidence in each other." Really cool passage. I wanted to ask about those early days, because there's a few good stories here about the peanut oil and how you were perhaps being disguised as something other than what you were.
Yeah. Oh, look, it's interesting to hear those words from Wayne, because he's like a brother, to be fair. when you go through, when you're involved in international sport and at your top of the tree like we were, she's a challenging old ship, and when you're at the top of the tree like he was, he faces all the seasons in terms of doing that. Just before I answer the peanut oil one there, it's kind of interesting because I think he gave a message like that at the launch, and what we did back in those days is we spent all our time making sure that there was a gap between where the rest of the world are and where we were, and it's a good gap. And so every year I used to sit and just sort of say, where is that gap? Where are we at? Because New Zealand's, we're pioneers, we We love new horizons. We love doing things that other people say can't be done. That's what defines us. Define the All Blacks. Now I think it's like that. We've got a major problem. And part of sharing openly is just get better or get caught. We have to get better. And, somebody's got to get in there and bridge that gap again. So we're not copying what the rest of the world's doing. We're not copying what South Africa's doing. We're actually setting the track, cutting the track for where we go. So it takes us back to the peanut oil. So I always described sports psych in the early days as the ugly duckling, and you have your strength and conditioning coach, you have the muscle therapist and physiotherapist and nutritionist, then you have the person working in mental performance, And if you think it change, look at COVID, first person they got rid of in all their teams, mental performance coach. Then it followed up, well, maybe we don't need the nutrition. So it's still a little bit, those attitudes still pervade. But Wayne saw it. He saw that the greatest obstacles to his own performance were getting stability in his mental performance, All we strive for in my area is to help people get reliable under pressure. Because if you're unpredictable under pressure, you are a liability. And so he saw that and wanted me in his team and fought hard and bravely for it. But the administrators and those in governance were miles away. They were dinosaurs. They were still Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble and doing all that. But,
Wilma.
And Wilma, yeah. Those little wee
I forgot the other one.
And Betty.
And but Wayne knew he wanted me, and so, I love the phrase, sometimes it's your impatience to win is the reason you lose. So if you get too impatient and you try and go too quickly, then you can quite often lose, like in sport, if you're defending phase after phase after phase and someone gets impatient and gets too far ahead or goes for to pilfer the ball and gets penalised, we lose. So Wayne had to say, yep, I want Bert, I want him involved, but if he tried to push it in too quickly and to push it in, then they would have kicked us out. So, right, bring him on as a masseur. We'll make out he's a masseur, but he will actually be practicing sports psychology and the principles of mental performance. And so I went in as a masseur, and we went away to tours, and then he'd get wind. He kept a close eye on when the big officials were coming in. When the officials were coming in, he'd go, Bert, come here, like this. Yes, Smithy. This is right. Such and such is coming in. So you know what you need to do. You've got to go and get some oil and come back. And when they come through that door, I want them to see you rubbing them. So off I go, trot, 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 and I get the oil and come back. But I'd actually picked up peanut oil rather than rubbing oil. I had no idea, mate, And so, and when the official came in, here I was rubbing the shoulder and doing the old shoulder and that, and he left out. He came over to me after and he says, Bert, he said, I wanted you to rub him, not fry him.
It's one thing, proof of concept through Smithy and Smithy's work in the administration side. Did you have to work hard on the players as well to kind of seed those concepts in so they were receptive to what you were trying to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you don't get external movement unless you get internal movement. So I can't just, information's not transformation. I can't just tell you sports psychology is useful to you. And you go,
good.
Is it?
Great.
Good, great. So I have to shift something internally for you to be able to do it. So I used to spend all my time looking at the different players and saying, where's the door? Where's an open door? So I get an opportunity in a moment to have a conversation where I can move them internally, which can then help them externally. And so piece by piece, with Smithy, I got opportunities to work with different individuals. You could capture an Andrew Mertens, who was a dominant player at the time, in a certain moment, a Tabai Matson, some of these players, and then all of a sudden they get a good result from an encounter with you, and then they become an advocate. But you're absolutely right. It was certainly a one-by-one approach. It wasn't sort of... I learned very early on that one size doesn't fit all. It's all about one size fits one. And once you and I think it's still applicable today for everybody. You can't customize excellence. You can't clone excellence. You've got to customize it. So, and that's the same in this area. So I picked them off one by one, and all of a sudden, when we started getting success, people would then attribute some of the reason for that success to some of the work we were doing. And then all of a sudden, when someone tells you that, you go, well, I might benefit from that. Then they become an advocate, and all of a sudden it becomes a bit more of a wave of influence that affects the team.
I'll link us up to the All Blacks, but you also did 6 or 7 years with New Zealand cricket. You're sort of, you're building the CV, you're doing all this work with Canterbury rugby teams. Smithy brings you into the All Blacks in 2000, but then leaves. And then John Mitchell comes in, but doesn't bring you in, and then you don't come back in until Graham Henry comes back in. That's the timeline? Yeah.
Like I was, while, Smithy came in, the world wasn't ready for a coach that had vulnerability. Like Wayne said, I'm not sure I can do this job. All he was doing was expressing how he was feeling. And John Graham, bless his soul, who was the working, I think he was on the board of the New Zealand Rugby Union, but had been Black Caps manager for the 8 years that I'd been touring with him. So him and I had a relationship like this. I used to say, DJ, you only made one stuff up, mate, and that's when you shut the door on Smithy back in the day, to actually do it. So he was, he was influential. So Smithy fell on his sword, but then said, no, I can do this. But by that stage, the administrators were too old school. And so in comes John Mitchell. Robbie Deans would have probably got the job if he hadn't got 10th in the Super Rugby the year before. And John now admits that he was too young to do it. So I still stayed with the team. I came in and set up the team room. For the 2003 Rugby World Cup, I used to go and spend a day and a half building this bridge. And it was a bridge that signified that cross from New Zealand to Australia where the World Cup was. A physical bridge. We got it made, and I used to go and put it in, and then I'd sort of set the team room. But it was very much behind the scenes, quiet and away. So I was there without being totally removed, but wasn't inside the every day-to-day culture of the group. And that's because they didn't really understand in the same way Smithy did. And obviously when they were unsuccessful in 2003, Graham Henry came in. He wanted Smithy. He wanted Steve Hansen. I'd also worked with Steve at that stage. Part of their proviso was, well, if you're going to have us in, then we want Burton as well. So certainly was a window where the influence was quietened. But I kind of liked it because it made me really look at how you can influence when you're not getting support for what you offer. But they knew enough of what I could do and give and use that part of, use one cylinder or even less of what I was capable of giving in that environment, I guess.
There's another interview you did a while back, but it kind of is going to bring us up to 2007. So you say, things were going really good. We won national titles in volleyball. We had good success in the cricket. We won at Lord's for the first time. We did some wonderful things with the Crusaders. We won 4 titles. Then I went over to France in 2007 with the All Blacks for the Rugby World Cup, and we lost. We went over there expecting to win, arrogant probably, and we got bundled out in the quarterfinal. And I thought, wow, I was part of the problem because I didn't have the answers to some of the things that we found the most challenging at the time. A lot of people say the referee was the problem. We were more of the problem. I came back from that and said, jeepers, you haven't got all the answers, mate. You need to get some help. So I formed a small group. There's a forensic psychiatrist in Christchurch, Kerry Evans, a very, very smart man. There's an 8th Dan martial artist called Renzi Hanman. And the 3 of us sat down and said, look, I don't know the answers to this. We need to work on improving. So we had conversations and we became an advisory group to the All Blacks. And all of a sudden, my thinking took on a whole new dimension. It didn't just shift me, it catapulted me into a different sphere of understanding.
Yeah, beautifully. There was another guy in there called Kerry Spackman, who was a neuroscientist.
He wrote
The Ant and the Ferrari?
The Winner's Bible.
No. He did. He wrote
The Ant and the Ferrari.
Yeah. He wrote the Winner's Bible, and he was interesting. So the first meeting you had Kerry, Renzi, the 2 Kerrys, and myself wow, there was some power, knowledge. Boy, did I realise that, that there was a whole area of understanding that I could use. I was the problem, and so was the group and I led that area. So, and what we did is we wanted to avoid pressure. We said, we're going to go over in 2007. What we don't want is any pressure. Let's just try and avoid it. How naive was that? I look at that now and say, what a plonker, in terms of doing that. And then that advisory group, we had lots and lots of conversations around what we needed to do. And luckily we had a coach that was accepting of it. Ted, the old school teacher, he understood that, 07 was so painful, and the reason we lost it really was in that the mental area. And I still believe it was, to be fair. And fast forward quite a bit of time, my understanding now, which was beginning to get forged then, is that, you hear everybody these days saying that you've got to walk towards the pressure and you've got to embrace pressure, and pressure's a privilege. Well, and I try to refute that a little bit in the book and just talk about pressure as a lifestyle. Once you understand that you don't have to rise above pressure, it's not about rising above pressure and finding it. It's actually accepting that that's it. And it's a bubble when I get inside that bubble, and I enjoy the discomfort, but I have a skill set that can help me navigate my way through those moments where everything is on the line. Not all moments are equal, and what happens today will determine what happens for the success of the tournament and the competition. And so, and there's a skill set that's entailed in that, so your skill sets don't work unless your mindset's right. So who teaches them the skill sets? So all of a sudden we began doing that, and I think we led the world in that area, and we got really, really good gains of moving in that moment. So it was, I was the problem in 07, and I needed expertise to enhance my ability to deliver what I could, and these guys had great knowledge. I think I'm okay in relating to people, and then when you can grab that and put that together, then you can move things really positively.
Yeah, that's really good.
It's a good way to describe it.
I sometimes am trying to think about the next question, but I was just so absorbed in your answer that I was just there.
Reflecting on it in the moment.
Yeah,
I like it, by the way.
Before that, you had brought in the no dickheads policy. So this is sort of predated 2007. So had that done a good enough job, or was there still work to do in that space?
There's a lot of work to be done, to be fair. The no dickheads came as a result of the challenges we had at the end of 2004. When really we had the boozy culture, the court sessions, we'd have court sessions and sometimes you couldn't even remember going to bed. I think we talk about it in the book where half of them are passed out on the floor and the other half are just trying to find their way back to the rooms, and it was forced. We just forced everything, and it was a bullying culture, and we had people preventing other people from playing by putting them down and making them feel bad, and so it became a pretty sort of environment that had to change, and that's where at the end of 04, when people don't realise, we had a crisis of identity where, we had a long discussion about everything in the environment and everything was up for grabs. There was the way we trained, the way we led, the way the coaches structured things, the haka. We came that close to losing the haka altogether. People don't realise how close we were. We were a whisper away. I can still remember a meeting, I think it was in the Heritage Hotel. I think there was a guy, I think it might have been Aaron Major, a couple of others, and we were all just talking about, beautiful conversation, and we were all just talking about the haka and saying that, yep, it's a wonderful thing, but whenever we do it, we've got TV cameras, poking in our faces. We're we're forced to do it, amidst the involvement of everybody else. And it's not for us anyway, it's for the Māori people. And why do we do it? And but we looked under the hood of that a little bit, and we said we had a crisis of identity because people didn't know who we were as New Zealanders, and we didn't know who we were as All Blacks. That's how Kapa Opanga was born. And so we just sat down and we had those discussions. Who are we? What do we stand for? And that's where we got Derek Lardally in from the East Coast, and he started working. We spent a year on that, and then slowly we sort of began to get this understanding, and the rope we talked about in the book, the black never changes, that's what defines us, and the silver fern, that's what unites us, and everyone's blood is red, no matter whether you are Māori, Samoan, Fijian, and those three strands get woven into this thread, this jersey, this black jersey. So when you pull it on and you represent Aotearoa, you represent so many things. And wow, did you see the people lift? When you connect with someone's spirit, it ignites their soul. And when it's expressed through a haka that has such rich understanding, it moves mountains. And what a privilege that year was, growing that understanding. You had BJ Lahore and had big arms and big he was going through. What's it like, BJ, for you when you did it? I can still remember we asked Tana, and the boys, when you run out, what do you feel like doing when you run out? Feel like ripping their throats out, and that's where that come from, ripping their heads off. Can't do that now because it's not right.
On occasion, it pops up, though.
It pops up a lot, especially for those buggers across the ditch, to do that. But I mean, all of that was wrapped around that identity piece. And if you lose that, you lose everything, really. Like, I've learned in my work that aspirations get you going, so you've got to look up and set a really high aspiration, and your identity, who you are, keeps you going. So you've got to work on both. They're bookends, really. If you work on both, and then all the work you do is in between. But you've got to keep checking that that's got a big enough gap, and that you're really nourishing this with the people, and there's meaning in everything you actually do.
You mentioned Tana Umaga there, and there's a real famous story around him talking to Sir Graham Henry and saying, well, who are you doing the team talk for? Because traditionally, coach would be ranting and raving on a game day before they go out, and Tana was sort of saying, well, no one's listening to what you're saying here. No one's paying any attention. Is those sorts of things are all on the table, right? Yeah,
well, I have never said this to anyone before, but I blame myself a little bit for that, because in 2004, we decided that the old co model of having a head coach here and then the captain here and then the players here wasn't going to fix it. So we changed to a shared model where you actually put this leadership group together. So you had captain, coach, and 5 or 6 or 7 leaders that had a flatter structure. And then we said, when the leader improves, everyone gets better. So let's develop the socks off these people. So we used to bring them out of the Super Rugby. We used to work and develop them and educate them. And then Tana and I had a lot of conversations, and it was a conversation that I had with Tana where we talked about, what things in the environment help us and what things hinder us. And then we got on to the team talk, and, Tana in his own way, well, I'm not really sure that's helping us, And so we said, I said, you need to tell the coach. You need to have that conversation. But where I fell at, why I say it was my problem, is because he did it in front of the group. It would have been a conversation probably best done to the side between the two of them. But Ted was such a beautiful man, and he said, well, if it's not good for the team, I won't do it. And we had a leaders meeting, and he said I think it was to Richie, well, what do you do when I give him a team talk? He said, to be honest, Ted, I'm just waiting to get out that door and hop on the bus. I said, Conrad Smith, what are you thinking when I'm doing my team talk? Ted, I've got a song in my head quite often and listening to that. And that's when he said, oh, well, if it's not right for the team, I don't do it. Although he tried to put other meetings in on a Friday, as he did right throughout, to fill it in, to do it. But boy, what a great man he was to be able to look at that and say that, if it's not right, we don't do it.
There's a really great part of the book talking about the library of lessons and how lessons actually stick. I want to read some of the bullet points there. If we're not looking for the lesson, we're too comfortable. If we can't connect the lesson to an actual moment of preparation, training or a match, it's not real. If we don't write the lesson down, we'll forget it. If we can't write the lesson down in a way everyone understands, it will be lost. If we don't make the lesson visible, it will be lost. If we don't remember the lesson, we will repeat it. If we don't read the lesson again, we'll forget it. If we don't share the lesson, we're not a team. And I want to link that up to the 2023 build-up, because you talk about the one thing that kept you awake at night is that no one that was attached to the lessons of 2007 was still connected in 2023. So you had this idea along with Fozzie, you created a 5-man human library, and it was Dan Carter, it was Richie McCaw, it was Kevin Mealamu, Conrad Smith and Liam Messam. And in order to bring to life all of the things that went wrong to help the team in 2023. I just thought that was just an incredible chapter of the book, some great insight. I was keen to hear about it.
Yeah, look, it was, what wisdom people that have, traversed the paths before you have. The early days of the lessons library were really good. When a Bledisloe Cup game series comes out, we now have a history that we just put up in the team room with things we've learnt from past Bledisloe games. Jeepers, you forget a lot if you don't write them down, hence some of the statements as you go. And then when we were looking at 2023, and it was on the back of going through COVID, it meant that we weren't able to get any nourishment from our elders, really. They're just like spiritual elders. And so when Foz and I were talking about different ways we could do it, we then came up with the idea of initially it was a human library where you sit them, like someone goes into a bookshop or to a library and you say, I want to learn about gardening or something like that, and you go and you can look at a book. And the initial idea was we could set up a human library where you could have your Richies, your Conrads, your Liams and these people here, and let's rotate them around 10 minutes and people could come in and ask them any question they wanted and then move on to another one. Yeah. Then we thought, good concept, but flaky. And then we said, well, why don't we do this properly and get them in? We get the needs we have. So, you had, Richie, the greatest captain of all time. You had going right through to Liam, who basically only played one or so game but had a major impact on the 2015 World Cup. But let's not just bring them in, give them a little bit of a motivation spiel and come out. Let's just totally indoctrinate them in the environment. So we just looked at the schedule and we said, right, you two come in here, you two come in here, you two come in here. And we ended up doing more than we anticipated because it was so powerful. So they came to every meeting. They went on the team bus to training and to games in the shed. And the power was in the quiet conversations they had when no one else was around and in the team room, and they just sidle up and have conversations with these legends. And just the simulation of information was a beautiful thing. I just used to sit back and watch it, like just watching something, a canvas being created with so much wisdom, and because they'd got really wise about what was really important and what was going to make a real shift and a real difference in pressure moments. And they just knew what the messages they wanted to get in, and it probably achieved more than we ever thought possible, I think. And the players loved it themselves too.
And you had a legacy group corner where there were sort of notes and messages were all posted. Yeah. I love that, and some of the examples in the book of what Richie wrote. Like, it's so powerful in their words, right?
Yeah, and so what we did is each week, as we led into the business end, is we just changed the question, One was about what advice have you got to give to the players as they go in here. We've just got to this point. Could you tell us about another athlete that you've admired in these situations and why they were successful? So it was different sort of mediums to get the same sort of message across to the people. And I used to walk into the team room and we had it tucked away in a quiet little place, And then you just watch the boys come in and they'd read it, they'd have conversations, and it was just wisdom fermenting inside an environment that was just so full of history and legacy and everything that you love about sport and what it involves.
We also spoke to Fozzie, Ian Foster, in the lead up to this, and we sort of asked him, about his perspective on you, and I want to read what he said. He said, if you look at sports psychology, there's lots of theories and tools. Bert spent a lot of time learning all about those things and doing the things that we would classify as sports psychology, but really his strength was his ability to, over time, learn that he needed to intertwine the sports psychology with the culture of the team. He worked really hard on understanding where the team was at and the challenges that were facing us. So it wasn't some sort of mystical sports psychology where you said, I don't know if this is going to be any good for us or not. It was very practical, tied to performance, tied to culture of the team, and that's where, in the later part of his time with the All Blacks, he really flourished in that regard. He went from being a tool that the coach would use to being an integral part of the whole group. When did you realise that you were becoming or had become an integral part of the All Blacks?
Well, that's humbling to hear those words. Gosh, I look at some of the things I did in the early days and I thought, geez, you twat. I cringe when I sometimes think about that. But I mean, it's a bit like, as I was saying when I sat on the bus, where are you at today or in the meetings, and what do I need to get to you and how am I going to get it to you? And some of my presentations that I facilitated through the players and often myself on a Thursday morning would last about 7 minutes, probably. And I would spend 50 hours, I reckon, preparing for that, because I'd want to make sure, how I introduced the message, what was the message was contained, and you learn to know what works and you learn to know what doesn't. Quite often coaches would come into my room, Ted did, Steve Hansen did, Foz did, would quite often say, where are you going with this, Bert? And I'd say, I don't know, but I know I'm going in the right direction. I could feel it in my gut. I could feel it if I was sitting there and I was, if I wanted to move someone, and I always wanted in my presentation, I knew if I could move them in a certain way, then the skill would grab. And once it grabbed, then you gave them a tool to hold on to in those pressure moments. So when did I know? I just think it grew as the years continued, I'm certainly not a theory-driven coach. I'm not following a menu-driven approach. There's no script for what we do in the big moments. It's just an environment where sometimes you've got to just be in a moment with everything you've got to get through it, and trust yourself that you can do so.
And maintaining and upholding standards is a big part of that environment and what you do, right? And in jest, I've often said you're only as good as the standards that you walk past, which is it's a mantra almost for the All Blacks, right? For the way they conduct themselves. And I think in the book you talk about, Steve Hansen turning up a minute late, 2 minutes late for a team meeting before the semi-final and being dug out by the team.
Yeah, and first of all, with a lot of teams have the values stuff, and I think the term values is soft, and that's why I kind of love the word standards, because we went through a whole discussion about, what does it mean to be an All Black? What do they stand for? What do you stand for? What do we stand for? What does our country stand for? So everything was around this word stand. So we said, well, maybe it should be standards rather than values. So once we got that right, then we could say, well, if this is what we stand for and this is the standard, what are the behaviours we expect? And we went through a whole process of determining that. And then we moved into the whole processes that it's a responsibility of everybody in the group, not just the leaders, to maintain the standards. And so, it was a 2015 Rugby World Cup semi-final against South Africa. We were over in the UK, had a meeting at 8:30 in the morning. The players were all there, and 8:31, Steve come through the door. One of the players got up, pointed his finger at him and says, "Coach, don't be late. Are you clear?" He's sort of going, "Oh, well, I can't do that." But he sort of, but he congratulated him. That was the beauty of the man. And, and so the standard you walk past is the standard you accept. And we encourage the people, if I don't pull you up on a standard that you're transgressing, then I'm letting you down, because you don't realise what you're doing to the culture of the group. And so, I always quietly, when I pulled myself back from the picture frame and looked at the environment, I always sort of used to count up the amount of times people called each other out on standards. And it's kind of interesting when that number went down low, it normally corresponded with a complacency that had actually invaded or pervaded the environment. Mm-hmm. And when it was going up, where people were going bang, 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 there was edge in the air and there was an intensity that they brought into the game. So again, it was a tangible way of assessing whether or not the team was ready or not.
Did you get dug out a couple of times on anything standards-wise?
Oh, often. If I'm on the bus, I love my coffee, and, quite often you sit, you talk, and if I left the coffee cup there, someone would come out and, when I'm off the bus, Bert, go back and get your coffee
You'd have
cup.
a field day in our office, I tell you.
But I mean, all of those sort of, and then I tell you, you do it once and then you remember not to do it, and, whenever you have a meeting or anything like that, it's always about leaving the environment better than it was when you came into it. And so, and we expect people to do that, and it's not just gimmicky, it's real, And
It is real, because sometimes it crosses over to team and player selections, right? Yeah. Where performance is impacted by something that's happened that, as a rugby public, we're not aware of, and a player is not selected for a disciplinary reason, which is often never spoken about, but it's handled inside the
quarter final against Ireland, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And big call to make, and you got to stick to your team.
And it's interesting that the easy decision would have been just, she'll be okay. And I wonder how many other teams in the world would have done that. But interestingly, when that decision was made, the rest of the group went like that. The effect that we had one of our star players who was stood down because of a transgression, but the impact it had on everyone else to say, wow, and they lifted and we actually got better. And, luckily he had an opportunity to play again the following week, so it's a small, that whole cultural thing, this whole me and we all talk about. And so the All Black environment has, for a long period of time, trumpeted the notion that we trumps me, and I have too, that the team towers above the individual, and I believe that. But as the world's moved, the me is really much more significant. Personal branding, all of the commercial stuff now where you can't move inside an environment without someone filming it, and a person comes into the environment, there's nothing that happens in there nowadays that no one hasn't seen. It's a worry, and I hate that. But the whole notion for me is, how do you get this power circle that me serves we, so that, personal growth is important, but we must strengthen me. So you get it's not just about personal growth or just about collective unity, it's a constant interaction between the two. And I think it's the modern conundrum for rugby. Will the All Blacks ever have their names on the jersey, back of their jerseys? Hope not, but probably will, because the personal branding, the me, becomes so strong. And I've always felt there's a power inside that identity where you get in there, you don't own the jersey, it's only got a number. Everyone who's worn it before is with you on that day, so perform in a way that gives them honour and show those that are going to fill it after you what it takes to give it honour.
So powerful when you put it like that,
How difficult did your position become? Like we had Fozzie on and he spoke about, the commercialisation of the All Blacks coming in, and sort of the Amazon All or Nothing documentary and all these sorts of things. And you have a role there of you're trying to protect players. You understand the commercial needs of the All Blacks, but are you finding those waters difficult to navigate?
Yeah, well, I was a problem for them, really. Fozzie would have told you that, and he talks about it in his book. But I think it was a problem of naivety on both our parts, really. I think. When I reflect on it, I was part of the problem too. I still believe in 2017, when we drew with the Lions, I felt the Amazon series that we had was contributed to us not getting the best out of ourselves, because all of a sudden we were entering into the commercial zone of domain of giving access to behind the scenes, and there was a big commercial opportunity. So you had the commercial people coming in that weren't quite ready to know how to do it in that setting, and you had us, the All Blacks in it, not sure on how we should do it, and it was a wrestle. I can still see us having a team meeting, and there were 4 or 5 big microphones like this sticking up in the middle of the floor as the coach was giving a pre-meeting speech, and people would turn around and people were all mic'd up and people would say, have you got your microphone on? Okay, and then no one would talk to them for the rest of which is silly because we weren't ready for it. And I think as it's got on and people are getting more used to it, it's okay. But it was interesting to see how that has moved forward and how it's moving. And I think it's now part and parcel, and people have accepted it as a way of being.
Mm-hmm. I want to. There's so many questions I've got in my mind, and I'm weary that I can't ask them all. No, I do want to give some space to Kevin Mealamu because
I'd give him my world.
Yeah, there's a really great story in the book about, and you talk about noticing little things, and it was like the Bledisloe Cup had been a bit dirty, it wasn't the pristine, clean like standard you would expect, and you asked Kev to do something about it, and then he ended up. You walked past his room, that evening, and he was sat around with 4 or 5 of the youngest All Blacks, and they were taking turns cleaning the trophy and passing it around and sharing stories of, what he had been through across his life and career. And I thought that was such a great example of what he brings. And you wrote in the book that I've never witnessed a more respected person in my time with the All Blacks. So I'd love for you to just give some space to talk about what made him so special.
Well, I think his faith makes him special. I think he's a man deeply rooted in faith and understands himself through that. He is the most respected individual I've ever seen inside the All Black environment. He holds more mana than anyone else I've seen inside the All Black environment. And as he moved through it, his presence even grew. And it's a different sort of presence to an outstanding athlete like a Richie or a Dan Carter, still brilliant. But why was he so good? Because he was honest, he was strong, he was governed by those principles of never having an off day. He was governed by a mindset that no matter whether he was in the 15 or in the 23 or outside the 23, if the team wasn't successful, first thing he did is look in the mirror and say, what could I have done today to help that team be successful? Where others would say, well, I wasn't in the 15, wasn't up to me. And he never did that. It was all personal with him. There wasn't an ounce of take from him, although he was a mongrel on the field. He could be a hard bastard, and he was. But it was that mix of humility, that determined humility, being the example that he was. You ask him what's important to him, it would probably start with faith, then it would start with family, and then it would go to football, in that order. And the 3 combining together just created a wonderful human being who played over 100 tests for, the most successful international sporting team of all time.
I find it fascinating. You talk about the longevity of careers. So you were privy to a guy like Richie McCaw from test number 1 through to test number 148.
Correct.
Or Sam Whitelock from test number 1 through to 153. Yeah,
correct.
Good. Like the growth of those individuals over that time, you're in a really, really unique position to see how McCaw, for example, forged himself as a leader. Like made, not natural.
There's a chapter in the book, I think it might have been in one of the Te Puna o Te Ki sections, where we talk about the growth of the goat. And, he's a goat. And people ask me that question quite often, like, he has talent, there's no doubt about that. He can do some things that are actually super special. But I think he was more made than born. and no one gets given everything, you know, and that you have to develop some things yourself along the way. And you know, he was put through the furnace in those early years, which really, you know, enabled him to dream big and leave no stone unturned. But at the heart of all that was his thirst to improve himself in all areas, you know, as a person, as a leader, as a rugby player, as a teammate. And we you know, and then he knew he could go to different sources to get the different pieces of knowledge that you need to grow yourself. You know, I don't think anyone can be, you can be successful, but you won't achieve what you're capable of on your own. So you've got to seek other sources to help polish the jewel that you've been born with. You know, when you say people can pick up a musical instrument and have that ability in them, all of a sudden it flourishes quicker than if I did, you know. Some people are great at maths, some people are great in other areas. He had great leadership ability that when it came to the fore, it was great. And the greatest probably quality of all is to being the example. You know, that you, when somebody sees you, you know, walk the talk and do the stuff in that way, then they'll follow you. But if you have a ripple of instability in any of those, they'll flick you, you know, quicker than anything.
You've got the players to manage, but you've also got the coaches. And I'm wondering about Fozzie, like that 4 year, it was a tumultuous 4 years, and we spoke about all the shit that was going on behind the scenes. How do you approach that differently? Have you got a plan for him specifically as well as the players?
Yeah, I think everybody, you know, we have, they're in our scope of attention, you know. So you've got your players who are the immediate gladiators, and we always joked when things are going really well, you know, the players get all the attention. When things aren't, the coaches get it all, and they get real tough stuff thrown at them. And we had there was a great little story, and it was sort of when we were going through the real tough stuff, and we were looking at COVID, and then all of a sudden the pressure came on from the union around his role. And we talked about this whole notion, is there anything beyond resilience? You know, because everyone uses the word resilience, which I have a bit of trouble with, really, because I find it hard to spell it, let alone explain it. So, but then we sort of talk about, you know, the different sort of levels, you know, that you have, you know, a person who basically, you know, a tough person or a flaky person is a little bit like a candle. So a puff of adversity or wind comes and it blows the candle out. And then the resilient person's a bit like a torch, you know, with a fuel, and the flame burns, and when the flame burns, a puff of wind comes, it will diminish the flame, but when it's gone, it keeps back. So there's someone higher than the flaky person that succumbs to pressure. But is there anything beyond that? And then we sort of talk about the fact that there's, you know, if you look at a bushfire, when a wind hits bushfire, it takes off and becomes more fierce and fearsome. And so we're in South Africa, and so there is something beyond resilience. It's that, so that you can get all these waves of pressure, but you can get stronger, not weaker. And so we're in South Africa. It was supposed to be our last test pretty well if we'd lost it. He was gone, and we would have all been gone too. Every morning when we got up and we went down to breakfast, I'd go over to Fozzie and I'd say, "Good morning, bushfire." Every day we went in there, and it became a good way of describing that. Yep, you're getting a lot of different heat, mate, but it can make you stronger if you keep it going. So, yes, we have. You've got a quiet eye on everybody, and that's important. And those at the top of the tree, I haven't had any coach going even right back to your Smithies, your Steve Hansen, your Graham Henry and Foz all had their moments where the furnace was turned right up, and she's just tough to be in the job. And you say, why the hell do you do it? Because they love it.
Yeah. 23 years, 304 tests, 2 World Cup wins with the All Blacks. A fairy tale win would have been another World Cup. But how do you process finishing with a loss in that final and not continuing on with the All Blacks?
Yeah, it's I tell a story of small margins. In 2011, the All Blacks won the Rugby World Cup 8-7, 1 point. The next day, we hopped onto a floats, and went around Auckland, 150,000 people around the streets in a parade. It's unreal, surreal. Fast forward to 2023, Rugby World Cup final, the All Blacks lose 11-12, 1 point. When we got to the airport on our way home, no one was at the airport to meet us. And that's the small margins of it. I had made peace with myself a little bit. I always wanted to go out on my terms. I think it was time for somebody else to hop into that seat. Coach was changing, freshness in all those areas I think was important. Did I miss it? Hell yes. I miss the camaraderie that comes before you go into war. The warmth that pervades the environment after the battle. When you just sit inside that shed. And one of my favourite little pieces in the book is that in the belonging section where it talks about the silence, the belonging that exists in a silent room, where nothing's spoken but everything's said.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of that, and I can just sit and reflect back and say, do you have any regrets? No. Do you miss it? Yes. But it was time to move on and do other things, and that's how I sit with it.
Shall we leave the All Blacks now and can maybe come back to one of your greatest matches? But I do want to, because not all of us are going to be in a high-performance environment in our everyday lives, and probably working on teams and team environments, most people listening to this, their connection will be maybe through kids sport, through coaching kids sport. And I understand there's a charter that you've got for your, is it an under-12 cricket team?
Yeah, I love this bit of the book. Yeah, I coach my kids' team. And you talked about an under-12 cricket team, and you were sort of, I don't know what the word is, bored, what's the word? You found the behaviour just totally unacceptable on the sideline. Abhorrent.
Is the word you're looking for? Yeah.
And I'm in that space, right? So it's like, what are the tools you can actually use? And you sort of like, you created this charter for the parents, and it totally corrected the behaviour. So I'm wondering if you can speak to the and tips for how to better behave on the sideline or get messages across and deal with kids.
Yeah, look, that was really interesting. I had a mate, a guy called Phil Duns, who was coaching the team, and we were good mates, so I'd go down and help, do some... Our kids were playing in it, by the way. So it wasn't as if it was just any old team. But crikey, it was the behaviour on the sideline. It was worse than I've actually seen. Like, I'm from Canterbury, and most of them have a patch over one eye anyway. So, but I mean, I think it was the parents thinking, how good's my son going to be or daughter's going to be? And they have all these aspirations about what they could get. Are they going to be future black caps, white ferns, whatever it is going to be, and with that, the way it pours out is this very tense, anxious environment, and I used to look at Phil and say, far out, mate, this is just not right. And so we had to, we just decided we'd actually try and tackle it to see what we could actually do, and that's how we came up with the charter. And we added a few things into it. It's a bit like, we all want our children to do well. So if I'm playing in the backyard and you keep pushing them and you keep critiquing them, and in the end they go, that's enough. But what are some ways we can do to help affirming them and keep them coming forward and rising forward and asking questions, and like say, don't make the wrinkles on your face come from frowns, make them come from laughter, and little wee things like that. And so we did a lot of that with them, and it just changed the whole... and the interesting thing is, the reason it changes, I think they didn't know any other way to react. But the moment you put something out in front of them, and you just take a little wee... if I was with the team, we'd just say, so how do we want practices to run? How do we want people to be on game day? And you chew that, you get to a nice little wee set of things. Let's see how that goes. Well, could we extend that to some other areas? So don't try to do everything at once. You build it over a period of time. But ultimately, at kids level, and it's the same at international level, what do we want it to be? We want it to be fun. The All Blacks play best when they have fun. And our kids play best when they have fun. So we've got to get out of our own way, really, as coaches and parents in particular, to help them be able to do that.
That's why I think the book is so powerful, because it is, the lens is high performance sport in the ultimate from a New Zealand perspective, but the lessons that you lay out in there can be applied and adapted to whatever level that you're operating in.
Absolutely. And that's the simplicity of it. It's just, it's interesting because the longer I've been involved in doing this, the more simple things have become, So when you're training, what's the main thing? Make the main thing the main thing. And don't try and do 10 things. What's the main thing I want to get across to the kids today? And just make that the main thing. And when you do that, then you're not trying to do 10 things, you just try to do one. Sometimes you've got to shrink the moment, so you just bring it right down. So what's important right now? Let's just do that. You don't take on the whole mountain, let's just move the first rock. And, once we get people to understand that, then kids get improvement and people get enjoyment and we move things in a really good way.
They sound like Gilbertisms, which is kind of something that I wrote down, which I think the book is full of them, is almost little one-liners that explain these sort of concepts, but in a really digestible way. Yeah. We did our best to kind of summarise some.
Yeah, I want to just jump through a few. Just before, on that parents charter, it was so good. Like, one of my favourite parts of the book. Like, I was thinking of like printing that out and sort of, using it for my team next year. I wondered if that's something that...
I think
a lot of people
buy copies of the book and give it out to all the parents. If we're going to support Gilbert, that's the way to do it.
But I did think about that when putting that in. I thought, that's what I'd do. I'd just get it and I'd just, you might look at it and you might shift a few things around given the context of what you're doing, but that's exactly what I'd do.
Yep.
And you'd chew the fat with them and say, what do you like? Do we need to add anything?
Yeah.
And then I bet you it's better environment for learning and fun.
It can't not be. Yeah, it's so easy to follow. I love it. Okay, so a couple of Gilbertisms. The performance triangle, so skill set, mindset, structure, and everyone thinks the most important to a skill set and mindset, but it's actually structure. And you give a really good example of how this can look in a game. So say a player wants to punch the ref in the face after a bad decision, and you have a structure in place. So structure 1, walk away from the official. Structure 2, connect with a teammate and ask a question, what are you seeing? And 3, assess the situation, draw breath, move on to the next thing. So it's like if you've got the structure in place, then it stops you making the rash decision, right? It's just like, it makes so much sense when you lay it out like that.
Well, it's the structure that shifts the mindset. Like a lot of people think, the referee makes a decision and I have this rise of emotions, and what we've learned is that you can only win when your mind is stronger than your emotions. So when the referee makes the decisions like that, the emotions become the king. It's hence the chapter on the jewel within. And so how do I win the jewel? How do I ensure you can't stop your emotions? And we don't want to, by the way. We just got to learn to manage them. So what do? I do something with my attention. So physically I move away, then I take my attention to talk to somebody else. And while you're doing that, then the amount of intensity drops. And then you come back and you connect to the situation and you've got a greater sense of control. And it's funny, I do sessions all around the world and I ask them that question. Okay, so all are important, yep. We want to get them all aligned, yep, that's great. I've said one of them I've found to be a superpower. What do you reckon it is? I always start with skill set and no hand goes up. I said, well, what the hell are you doing all the skills for? And then I go, mindset, every hand in the room goes up. And then you go to structure and you have that conversation. And the issue is if people are trying to change their mindset through the mindset window, you can't. It's too hard. It's too hard. You need a structure. You need to do something else to shift that. Once you get that and then you understand the other part of the lethal cocktail being the discipline piece, then there's nothing in life you can't get through. You think of all the tough times in your own life, structure and discipline will get you through. And it's kind of cool to know, and I just find myself even now saying, if something's really difficult, I say, right, what's the structure? When I'm introducing a skill, like the question you asked before about a mental skill in keeping them simple. I always say, what's the structure I'm going to use to put it in front of the boys? And once I go through that lens, then how am I going to catch them? What do I want to teach them? How am I going to test them? And that little phrase then gives me a structure to be able to deliver it to the group. So it's kind of cool.
Very cool.
Very cool.
Whinge up.
Really cool. I think that was that's really cool.
Whinge up, but don't whinge down.
Yeah. Gosh, I wish I'd learned that earlier. You know, like I kind of talk a lot about, you know, everyone vents about their problems, and what we try to do is get people to understand that they need to vent about their joy, about the great things that are happening in their lives. So if you vent about your problems all the time, then you whinge all the time. So people get around a table like this at Smoko, and the first thing they do, they start complaining about the boss or one of their colleagues, and you know, and it becomes a cancer if everyone does that, especially if it's left unchecked. And so we encourage people, whinging's okay, but you can only whinge up, you can't whinge down. So I can't whinge about the person below me or you know, even to the people beside you, really. And that's why I use Steve Hansen's quote, which he always sort of go, moaner, complain to the moanee, you'd say, you know.
It's not a bad shag.
Yeah. It's a beautiful one.
Yeah, that's a good.
And he could do it beautifully, but they're all, you know, that's taught up in the grey person, you know, the ones that have nothing to say in a meeting, but when they get outside in the cafe or in the bar, they're the experts on everything. Those are the cancers that kill a culture. And they're the standards that people have got to go, stop. No, stop. Don't do that. Don't say that. You go and talk to him. And the moment you got that self-policing going on, then the culture's vibrant, you know, and it's moving positively.
What does "don't take the sausage" mean?
Oh, beautiful phrase, isn't it? Like we had, the book launch was beautiful because I had some of my volleyball boys there, and I knew when they'd read that they'd love it, you know, because look, I played volleyball and I travelled the world with volleyball, but we paid for every trip we went on, you know. To this day, I don't begrudge a cent of it. But boy, some of the philosophies we developed were just lifelong, you know. That phrase ended up influencing great environments like in the All Blacks, you know. It basically means that look after someone else before you look after yourself. So, you know, if there were only 2 sausages in a plate on this table with the 3 of us, then we'd be fighting to make sure that we were the one that missed out. You know, so don't take the sausages, put other people's needs amongst yours. And when you're serving the wider cause and each other, then you create a wonderful culture within the group. And I think we talk a little bit, you know, getting into cars, people like to ride shotgun and people are going for the back door to try and get in there, so they don't actually get the best seat. Where other teams go in there and some of the people just expect to walk into the best seat themselves. So, you know, it's a good old little phrase, you know, and people would just say, take the sausage, you know, and it's just a synergy to look after the others before you put yourself and take rather than actually give to the environment.
I love that one. Wishbone, backbone, Funnybone?
Yes. You know, you don't need to pay millions and thousands and hundreds of dollars on personal development plans that a lot of people do. We want things that grab, so you only need 3 bones in your body. You need a wishbone, so dream big. You need a backbone, understand there's going to be obstacles along the way, and don't be afraid. And if you've not got any obstacles, you're probably not on the right track. And then you've got to have fun along the way. And the only proviso is don't grow a wishbone where you should be growing a backbone, because wishing activates hoping, and hoping doesn't work in parachuting or birth control. So it ain't going to work for when you want to achieve something in sport. So.
I've got one. Preserve the core, but disrupt the edges.
Yeah. That phrase sort of came from a piece of research that was conducted, which looked at examining the reason why some businesses coming onto the landscape didn't survive very long. You know, they'd come on and disappear. And yet there's another group of organisations that have blown the candles out on their 100th birthday and they look like they're going to be there forever. And so they asked, the research said, well, what are these centennial? They called them centennial groups. What do they have that the other ones don't have? And they did those two things. One is they preserved the core. They understood who they were, and they didn't mess with the core. And then they send waves of disruption around the edges, so innovative ways to keep growing. So in the All Blacks, the core is the jersey, the black jersey. It's black, that defines you. The silver fern unites you. We don't mess with that. And that's why we had a lot of fights over, not fights, discussions over the commercial stuff that appears on the jersey. You look around the world, lots of teams now they're smothered with so much commercialisation that they've lost their identity. And I think that's messing with the core. And so we have to make sure we don't do that. But how do we market? How do we get innovative in the game? How do you get 1,000% improvement? Well, you improve 1,000 things by 1%. That's disrupting the edges.
Is it innovation? Did I get that right? 10% of everybody's budget in the All Blacks was dedicated towards innovation?
That's in Wayne Smith's day. He put every department was charged with that. Spend 10% of your time and 10% of your budget on innovation. When you think of what we talked about before about being here and not following, but actually getting everyone following you, I don't think many teams would do that, but that's what contributed to us having that gap, maintaining that gap. And it's just, people think it's wasted resource and if you're trimming the budget, what you've got to do. But in a sport like ours, you've got to have your people growing and not just doing it plastically to make out, put you on this course and you're going to get better at it, you know.
It might not be an example, but is the club night an example of an innovation that you introduced into, or that was introduced into the All Blacks environment?
Wayne Smith introduced that into the All Black environment. And we poo-hooed it for about 3 years. It took him 3 years before everyone took him seriously. Then we put it in, and every team now around the place is doing it, you know. Another one of just being ahead of people, and, you know, I'd kind of, question I reflected on, what is it that we were doing that no one else was doing when I finished, in terms of coming back and, how we use the legacy group and doing those sort of things. We're starting to move into some of that space. But the club rooms was certainly that. Boy, do we have some fun in there. No work, you can't talk shop. So you had to put a muzzle on a few of the coaches, to stop them from sidling up and have a look at this, But it was a fun night. A few beers, a bit of a yarn.
Am I right in thinking club jerseys to connect you back to where you started your journey?
Yeah, so you have, you wore a club jersey of origin, so first club that you played for, which became a bit of a problem later on because a lot of people don't play for the clubs. They go straight into the professional circuit, and so pick one that's close, but always connected back to a club of some sort for them.
I'm going to bring us on the home straight soon. I reckon from any guest we've had, you're the one I feel like we could talk to for the longest. Like any button we push, there's such great answers. But I do want to give a little bit of space to talk about Chelsea, because I wanted to know how that's different. Because with the All Blacks, it's these, long-term visions and teams that are together for years and years. And you get into a club like Chelsea and it's highly paid stars from different countries and coaches are getting sacked and fired. So how is that different work?
Yeah, look, Chelsea was interesting. Again, getting the opportunity to work with an EPL team, and I'd made the decision to leave the All Blacks at the end of 2023, and the Chelsea opportunity came up before that, actually. So I had a stint over there before I'd finished with the All Blacks. The owner who took over from Abramovich had read Legacy, the book Legacy, and he'd said to his agent guy, this guy, Gilbert Enoka, I'm quoted in the bit, says, go and get him.
Yeah.
So he just rang me up and says, what are you doing? So I come over and did some work. But boy, what an environment, People say, how do you describe Chelsea? I say, completely, or exactly the same but completely different. Because they have the same pressures, they want the same things, but there's, how's it different? You've got... there were 13 different languages spoken in the changing room. When they didn't succeed, they just got rid of a player and spent money on another one. I think in my time there, they went through, 5 different coaches. And what they What they haven't understood, I don't think, is the essence of what it takes to become great. So you can have all the talent, and yes, you can have difference, so you have different people, but difference isn't the problem. You don't want sameness, it's a lack of connection that's the problem. When people don't connect with each other, then you can't create an environment where you can hold the tension that exists in those tough moments. So the All Blacks can go through a period that's difficult. We lose a game, there's a couple of games, and there's a lot of tension in it, but because the brotherhood's strong, you hold it well. Over there, the moment the tension comes on, everything just dissipates and people go out, the owners feel the pressure from the media, then bang, off goes the coaches. When one coach goes, so does their band, so the whole band is actually replaced. So, but then, jeepers, I presented in front of the group several times, and you know when you got a group, and you could capture them easily. And the first EPL team that adopts an All Black-esque type environment will get a significant advantage. And that's that understanding is we don't want sameness, we want the differences in cultures and all that, but how do we power up that connection in a way that enables us to hold the tensions that inevitably come from the sport, and then how can we thrive amidst that environment. But a lot of fun. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, so were you brought in to do a few sort of presentations, not work individually with the players, or what did your work actually look like in there?
I'm not sure what Todd wanted me when he came in, but he threw me in, he went to Graham Potter, who was the first coach, and like I got on real well. Went and stayed at his house and with him and his family, just terrific fellow. Got on like a house on fire, so I'd just start talking with him, and because if you don't have a relationship with the coach in any environment, then it's unwinnable down below. So so my conversations with him and his coaching group, and then from that where they could understand how I was, then I got in front of the players. Then he was employed for 5 years, I think lasted 230 days, and he was gone. Then who followed him? Frank Lampard, brilliant guy. And so he was only a temporary guy. He was brought in for a period, and but he was fantastic. And again, I'd just work with him, get a relationship, and we would go. And then he put me in front of the guys, and I'd go to Bournemouth and I'd sit on the bench down there. So all of a sudden I'm this little wee Kiwi guy from down under's on the bench of a Premier League game over in the. I thought, geez, it's like a pig in shit. It was fantastic, and it was just terrific to do that. But each time, while the face of pressure changed, the principles didn't. It's get your relationship with your coach. If that goes well, then the opportunities come. Look at the culture so that we can keep that and make sure that is really, really right. And then, we want people to strengthen their mental performance so that they can win the fight that occurs. So I have influence on all those three levels, but you'll only get it if you have it right at the top. But I did really enjoy it, and I have strong relationships with the players. Some of the players there still now that I converse with, which is a lot of fun.
Is it the same kind of remit for New South Wales Blues and England cricket that you've been involved in as well? Those sort of similar and working parameters?
Yeah, well, the Origin series was fantastic. It was, I've loved that as a sport and a spectacle. And so last year we had Madge Maguire, and it was the same. It was getting an aspiration, getting them playing for each other, build on that connection. It all comes from that. And we did that both last year and this year, even though we weren't successful this year. We were close, but the principles are the same. And with Baz and New Zealand and England cricket, that's an opportunity that's presented itself, and I'm still feeling my way in that, really. But again, it comes back to what Baz wants and how that works, and with him and Ben, and boy, they're all different. You think of the All Black, how that's structured, Chelsea, how that's structured, State of Origin, how that's structured, English cricket, and she is, they talk about a galaxy that we all live in. Well, that's a bit of a galaxy of different people as well, but a wonderful one.
Gilbert, this has been such awesome. I've loved this chat, and I know you guys have both got flights to get to, so I just want to finish with a bit of family chat. married to Michelle for 42 years. You've got advice on everything. You've got such wisdom. What can you say about the secrets of a long-lasting marriage and healthy relationships?
What I've tried to do in the book is, that when they put it in front of me and said, this is the preface and this is the afterword, I said, what? I didn't even know what the hell they were,
Yeah.
I'm paint by numbers chap. So I said, well, these are my opening thoughts and these are my concluding remarks. But I mean, to be able to talk about what it takes to have a marriage is you need a person that gets you. There'll be a lot of people, like my life is, my daughter was asked at our book launch on Thursday about, what have you learnt from your father over the years watching him do what he does? And she said, I've just loved watching someone love doing what they love doing. It was a great comment, that because I'm so passionate about sport and then doing it in that way, and she's so right. But I mean, I was just lucky my wife, Michelle, got that, and that she could allow me to do that. It won't work for everybody, but it works for us. And, but I mean, I kind of, like Te Puna o Te Ki is the wellspring of wisdom, and then the final one is the golden wellspring, where it just sort of says, and it sums up in a very little bit about the keys if you really want to get it done, is that other people matter and that you can't do it on your own. And, the biggest advisor and confidant for me is my wife, and, she tells me when I'm doing things okay, and boy, does she tell me when I'm not. And I love that because the honesty that exists in that conversation is just absolutely important to me. So I get it straight and I get it real. And that's what I love when you're trying to work with the human spirit and get the best out of it.
I love that. It's. I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up. I mean, there's been so much in here. Yeah, you've been, like I said at the start, you've been a dream guest for us for so long, and it's because of everything that's come out of your mouth across these 2 hours. Thank you so much. For the listeners, I cannot recommend the book enough. Go and get it. There's so much gold in there. You will learn and you will grow from it. So yeah, thank you so much for coming in and sharing with us, Shay.
Yeah, Become Unstoppable is the book. You can get it out there. But the Dallas Seymour's words, you mentioned them in the opening. I think that encapsulates it as planting seeds to help people flourish in the future, which is exactly what this is about. You've done an amazing job with our national team for so many years, but there's so many more people that can benefit from the knowledge and wisdom that you developed in that environment, which I hope spreads through our great country.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thanks for having me on this podcast. Really appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Gilbert.